Hello again, Hadley and Eliza. It is Friday. It seems like it's been 100 days since I've seen you two. And I can't wait, but I think it's going to be a while longer. So anyways, I'm still reading the Hoboken Chicken Emergency. Is that in focus? There we go. And we are on chapter 7. So if you remember yesterday, Arthur is out looking for Henrietta, and he had just has gone home because his parents told him to come home, and he was taking a bath in the chicken foot tub. So anyways, he still doesn't know where she is, but she's out in Hoboken somewhere. Chapter 7. Sunday was a misery, as Arthur expected it would be. The day with the cousins droned on. It seemed to Arthur that his parents would never go home. Arthur was afraid the big apartment building would be locked by the time he got there. What if Henrietta was locked in overnight? She had been in the big building for 2 days. What could she find to eat in the empty building? What if the workmen discovered her Monday morning? Arthur thought about pretending to be sick to get the family started home, but that would only have the effect of getting put in bed and watched closely once they get there. He would have to wait until the grown-ups got tired of each other. Papa finally had enough. He got his family together and hustled them into the car. It was very late, almost dark. Arthur was in despair. That means really, really sad. The building was sure to be locked up. Papa turned on the car radio. And those are the football scores. That's what the radio said. The voice on the radio said. And now a bizarre news story from Hoboken, New Jersey. Arthur and his family stirred and listened. Many reliable witnesses have reported sightings of a giant chicken or chickens. Last night, more than 50 people reported chicken sightings to the police, the FBI, and the White House. That's where the president is, you know. The chicken, which stands about 15 feet high and an estimated weight of over 1,000 pounds, was seen walking or running through the streets. There have been no reports of injuries or attacks on persons. This radio station will keep you posted on the chicken crisis in Hoboken. Could that be Arthur's chicken, Mama asked. No, Papa said. Arthur's chicken was only about 250 pounds. 266, Arthur said. Arthur remembered how confused people had gotten over Henrietta was a polar bear, a gorilla, or a chicken. And as far as Arthur knew, Henrietta, or number 73 as the professor called her, was the only chicken to escape. It was amazing to Arthur how inaccurate people could be about an ordinary 6-foot-tall, 266-pound chicken. He was sure it was Henrietta they had seen. There wasn't any 1,000-pound chickens running around Hoboken. It was just Henrietta. That meant she had gotten out of the big apartment buildings. She was loose in the streets again. Arthur managed to get out of the house and spend a couple of hours looking for Henrietta. He didn't have any luck. The next morning, Arthur snuck out early and looked for Henrietta before he went to school. Again, he couldn't find her. When Arthur arrived at school, the kids gathered outside were talking about the giant chicken. Some said there was one, some said there were a lot of them. Some of the kids thought they came from a flying saucer. A couple of kids claimed to have seen giant chickens, which interested Arthur until he heard them say that the chickens were 2 stories high, that's like 50 feet high, and had paralyzer rays for eyes. Then he knew they were making it up. A little picture of a flying saucer that those chickens might have come in. The bell rang and the kids went inside. Mrs. Gusenberg handed over programmed reading materials, little cardboard-bound books with pieces of stories in them. Arthur wished they'd get to read a whole story once in a while. It was an ordinary day at school. Schoolwork got done. Miss Gusenberg had trouble with the usual kids. The clock ticked. Then there was a scream. It came from somewhere in the building. Everybody jumped. Some kids began to cry immediately. Miss Gusenberg jumped up and ran to the door. There were more screams. They seemed closer. Miss Gusenberg went out into the hall. Then she screamed. Miss Gusenberg staggered back into the room, holding onto one of the blackboards. She went to her desk, fell in her chair, and put her head in her arms and sobbed. Can you see why? Can you see what's out the door there? Looking at Mrs. Gusenberg? It's Henrietta. Arthur and a couple of the other kids ran to the door. They looked out into the hall. Teachers were still screaming in various parts of the building. Down the hall, feathers ruffled in every direction. Running like mad was a giant chicken. The chicken waved its wings every time a classroom door was open, and the teacher opening the door would scream or faint. Arthur ran after Henrietta, but by the time he got to the front door of the school, which was still swinging, Henrietta was out of sight. He ran out into the street and looked in both directions, but there was no sign of her. Everybody was sent home. School was closed until further notice. The teachers had a meeting and demand protection. They said their contracts did not require them to work in the presence of wild chickens. Arthur came through the door at 11 o'clock. "What are you doing home so early?" his mother asked. "There was a chicken scare," Arthur said. "We all got sent home until further notice." The chicken scare was not limited to Arthur's school. The whole town was chicken panicky. The police department's switchboard received thousands of calls from frightened people. The mayor's office was full of citizens demanding protection from the giant chicken. Schools were closed. People were afraid to go shopping, to go to work, to just step outside their doors. Special police chicken squads were sent to cruise the streets in cars. They had nets to capture the giant chickens. Helicopters buzzed over the rooftops looking for chickens. Men stayed home from work to protect their families. Neighboring towns sent fire trucks and teams of veterinarians to help in the chicken emergency. Arthur was desperate to find Henrietta before some policeman threw a net over her. It wasn't easy to get out of the house. Mama and Papa were convinced that it wasn't Henrietta, but some large wilder chicken that was causing all the problems. Here are the police searching with helicopters and police cars for Henrietta, or the giant, what they think is the giant chicken. Arthur tried to be home for the 6 o'clock news every night. He was trying to see if there was a pattern to Henrietta's movements from the television news reports. As far as he could tell, there was not. Henrietta turned up in different parts of Hoboken, sometimes blocks away from one another. She would be seen in 4 or 5 places in a single night. The giant chicken was seen emerging from the Clan Brothers seafood restaurant at 4:55 in the morning. The television newscaster would say. People had finally realized that there was only one chicken, not a whole flock. The restaurant kitchen was a shambles. That means it's a mess. It was all torn up. And 46 pounds of frozen French fried potatoes were eaten by the giant bird. Hoboken police officer Smith and Mooney gave chase in their squad car and cornered the chicken on Court Street near 3rd. The chicken then kicked a huge dent in the left fender of the squad car, which interfered with steering and ran off into the night. Officer Smith and Mooney will receive decorations from the mayor at a ceremony at City Hall tomorrow afternoon. That means they're heroes. There were reports on the 6 o'clock news every night. The giant chicken broke into restaurants and food stores, overturned garbage cans, and beat up a number of German Shepherd dogs. Arthur worried that being hunted was turning Henrietta mean. The chicken panic was turning into a deep depression. People had chickens on their minds all the time. An ugly situation outside a poultry market nearly turned into a riot. Bus drivers refused to accept assignments that routed their buses through Hoboken. Schools were closed, and absenteeism at work was over 50%. The mayor, who was planning to run for re-election this year, had received a grand many nasty letters and phone calls. Half of the police department was on sick leave, and the fire department had a new policy of not responding to any chicken calls, saying that chicken control was the job of the police department. The chief of police said his men were not trained or equipped for chicken control. It was the job of the Hoboken dog warden. The Hoboken dog warden, the most unpopular man in town, had vanished, and nobody knew where he was. The state police had issued a statement to the effect that the chickens were a local problem unless they interfered with traffic on state highways, and the FBI was not answering its telephone. In other words, nobody wanted to deal with the chicken. And anyways, here is when the police were chasing Henrietta, but they did not catch her. So where we are now is Henrietta is still running wild in the streets of Hoboken, and we will take the story up there tomorrow. Okay? Love you guys madly and hope to see you soon.